Hello, I'm Danielle McIntosh, a Senior Consultant with the Dementia Centre, and I'm here with my colleague Natalie Duggan, also a Senior Consultant. Today we're going to talk to you about understanding behaviours, particularly for people in a hospital setting. Natalie, when we talk about understanding behaviours, what do we mean?
Well, Danielle, we display behaviours in everything we do in everyday life. So today we're particularly focusing on behaviours that cause distress for the person with dementia. Distress for them, distress for their family, and distress for their staff.
So the terminology that we then use,
Yes.
how does that impact on how staff would approach understanding behaviours?
Well, one thing that happens, Danielle, is people start to label people with dementia who display certain behaviours. They will call them wanderers, they will call them screamers, they'll come up with these labels. And what actually happens, it robs the person of their identity. So therefore in things like handovers or discussion about a resident, they actually start to refer to that label.
And that's not helpful, is it, when you're actually describing the behaviour rather than what's causing the behaviour? So the trigger or the thing that's behind why the person is communicating the way that they are.
People don't wake up in the morning and decide to act in a way that distresses them or distresses family or staff. So it's our responsibility to work really hard to find out what those underlying triggers are.
What approach or process do you go through in your clinical experience with understanding and finding out what those triggers might be?
The best way to find out is just to get to know the person. It's simple, it doesn't take a lot of time, and you can set about doing that by spending time with the person, reading previous notes that might be provided about the person, and most importantly, if able, spending time with their family. So Danielle, you've had a lot of experience in the hospital setting. I'd like to hear from you what strategies you would use in a hospital setting.
The first strategy I would use, which you've already touched on, is actually getting to know the person. And in a hospital setting, when you actually might only have the person there for a matter of days, is finding out as much as you can about who they are and what routines they have. And that can include observing the person and finding out what's important to them, but also talking to family members, friends, but also other providers in the community that might be going in and helping that person on a day-to-day basis, finding out how they do it and strategies that they use. Because if it works for the person at home, it has a better chance of being able to work in a hospital environment. The second strategy that I find really useful is actually understanding that the environment that we work in a hospital is very alien and very clinical and very confusing and frightening for the person with dementia. Everything is very clean, white, shiny floors. Things are labelled and hidden, particularly some rooms. And there are long wards with lots of rooms that look very similar. And if you're struggling in understanding which is my space, because it looks exactly the same as the other 29 beds in that ward, a person with dementia is going to struggle to find their space. So understanding the environment and understanding how disabling it can be is the key to understanding how to support somebody with dementia so that behaviours and triggers don't occur. So paying attention to rooms such as the toilet, easy to find and easy to use, so that the person doesn't get frustrated and doesn't get frightened and needing to seek a toilet or what they think is a toilet. And that's when people start to label them as perhaps they urinate in inappropriate places. Or maybe it's because they couldn't find the toilet, or what they did use to urinate in actually looked like a toilet when looked through their eyes. So understanding the environment, making sure that it's quiet, that it doesn't have busy thoroughfares and lots of people walking through. Because if you're seeing multiple faces all of the time and you can't remember who they are, it can be really frightening.
Those two messages you've given are really important, Danielle. So what's your third?
The third one is communication, having an effective way of communicating with the person with dementia so that they understand you and you can actually understand them. So for example, we cared for a gentleman who took a long time to process the information and the questions that we were asking him. And what was happening, he would become aggressive towards the staff because it was his way of trying to tell them to stop, to give him time to process that information, and they weren't picking up on that. So they just kept asking him the same question over and over again, and then assumed that because he wasn't giving them an answer that there was something wrong. He got angry and he would lash out, when what the staff should have done was asked him the question, then noticed that he was processing that information and just stopped and waited for him before then going on with the next question or rephrasing the question in a different way. If we understand how a person communicates, we can actually have our language match what best suits them. A really common example is when you ask someone to go to the toilet. A young staff member asking an older male, maybe of a diverse cultural background, could be inappropriate to ask them to go to the toilet.
Yeah.
There are people that use different phrases, so things like they would like to spend a penny, or maybe they'd like to see a man about a dog. Different phrases that, if you know the person, will actually be more effective rather than standing over someone and asking them if they want to go to the toilet because they may not understand. Simple things like knowing the person, understanding the environment and being able to see the environment from the perspective of someone with dementia, and understanding how to communicate with them are much more effective than giving someone a tablet or restraining them physically.
Spending time with the person, getting to know the person, will help identify the triggers and hopefully help reduce their distress.
That's right. You spend time to save time.